Here are two distance equals rate times time problems, and these are taken from the extra word problems that I gave you last week. Now, let's try to set up a picture for each of these. In this first case, Ross and Rachel were 200 miles apart. So here's Ross, here's Rachel, and we know that this total distance is 200 miles. Okay. They are headed toward one another, so he's walking this way, and she's walking this way. If they meet at 6 p.m., okay, so they are going to get to some point where they meet at 6 p.m. Right now it's 2 p.m. So at this point we can answer that time for both of them is 4 hours. Okay, they meet at 6 p.m. and Ross was traveling 10 miles per hour faster than Rachel. What was the speed of each person? Okay, so let's do some thinking over here. We know that Ross's rate is 10 miles per hour faster than Rachel, so 10 more than Rachel's rate. So let's use a variable. So Ross is going to be 10 plus, I'm going to call that R. So R is going to stand for Rachel's speed, or her rate. So Ross is then 10 plus R. I don't need another variable. I know that his is 10 plus R. Okay, we know that each of them travels some distance. Here's a distance and here's a distance. So Ross's distance equals his rate multiplied by time. So we know that Ross's distance equals his rate, which is 10 plus R. We know that from over here. Multiplied by the time, which is 4. So this represents how far Ross traveled. Okay, now let's look at Rachel. Rachel's distance equals her rate multiplied by her time. Now we know Rachel's distance equals her rate, which is R, multiplied by her time, which is 4. So this is exactly how far Rachel traveled. Now, after these two have traveled, we know that they meet. So we know that when he goes towards her, they meet somewhere. Which means that if Ross's distance is over here, that is 10 plus R multiplied by 4. And Rachel's distance is over here, that's 4R. I'm just going to rewrite that. We know that the entire thing is 200 miles. Hopefully you can look at this picture and realize that if I add these two distances, I'll get the entire distance, which is 200 miles. So that's where my equation comes from. We know that R equals 20. Now you have to figure out, does that actually answer the question? What did R stand for? What's it mean? Well, we know that R is Rachel's speed. So, in reality, we know that Rachel's speed is 20 miles per hour? Yes, miles per hour. We know that Ross's speed from here is 10 plus Rachel's. So that means he was traveling at 30 miles per hour. So that is my answer. Okay, let's try another one. Eddie and Diana walked to the dock at 3 miles per hour. Okay, so here's Eddie and Diana. They go to the dock, and their rate is 3 miles per hour. That's not a distance, that's a rate. And then, once they got to the dock, they jumped in a boat and motored to Dillon at 9 miles per hour. That again is a rate. It's not a distance, it's not a time, it's just the rate. The total distance was 15 miles. So that means from where they started to where they ended is 15 miles. And the trip took 4 hours. So this 15 miles took 4 hours. How far did they go by boat? And it says, hint, use a system of equations. Okay, so let's think about what are the things that we don't know, and what is it asking us to know? It's asking us, how far did they go by boat? So, I know I can find their distance if I have their time. So I'm going to let t equal time by foot. I know that distance. Well, now we have some other pieces of information that maybe we need to somehow reconcile, somehow understand. If I know the distance of them walking, and I know that the total distance was 15 miles, let's look at that. 3t, this represents the walking distance. And they had to add that to the boating distance. 9 multiplied by the time. This time is not the same. So I'm going to call it b. b equals time by boat. But we know that 3t plus 9b is going to equal 15 total miles. Each of these are distances. So this is the distance by boat. We know that altogether it was 15 miles. Now, what about 4 hours? What is that going to be? Should be the amount of time spent walking, which is t, and the amount of time spent boating. So if I have the time by foot and the time by boat, do I add them or multiply them to get 4? Perfect, we add them. Okay, now I have a system of equations. 3t plus 9b equals 15, and t plus b equals 4. So now it's your choice if you want to use substitution, elimination, or if you want to graph. I would choose elimination. So I'm going to multiply by -3. Now my equations say 3t plus 9b equals 15, and -3t minus 3b equals -12. Add these together. I have 6b equals 3, which means b equals 1/2. Now be careful when you're interpreting this. b equals 1/2. That is the time by boat. So that means it took 1/2 hour by boat. I know that it's hours and not minutes or seconds or anything because all of my other information is in hours. Miles per hour, miles per hour, hours. So that means that's their time by boat. If I know that altogether it was 4 hours, and 1/2 is by boat, that means 3.5 hours were spent walking. Now, has that yet answered my question? No, it says how far did they go by boat. So I want to know a distance. So how far by boat? That distance equals a rate, which we know to be 3, multiplied by a time, which is 3.5. So that means 3 multiplied by 3.5 is 10.5? Let's just double check. Perfect, 10.5 miles. So that means it took 4.5 miles by boat.